small journey into a framework called the JoHari Window. And some of you will have looked at this before, but I'd like to share it with you tonight as a way of thinking about how do we build trust. And part of what we're doing in this session together is trying to build a relationship and a connection with one another. We're trying to move beyond politeness. This is a term that some of you know, Deka Ibrahim Abdi, the late Somali Kenyan peace builder. She used to talk about how we move beyond politeness, how we move beyond this face that each of us presents when we show up for something. How can we get deeper and know one another better so that we can actually work closer, either with each other or with those conflict stakeholders that we're trying to change. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint of exactly that. Let me make sure it's here on my screen. No, of course it isn't here on my screen. Let me try that again.
Tell me if you want me. Yep.
No, I will definitely call on you if I need any help from you, but you're a bit of a troublemaker, so you'll probably make it worse. Here we go. The JoHari Window. So a couple of fun facts about the JoHari Window. It's actually quite an old framework, and I don't think that it was intended originally to be about trust building and relationship building, but it was designed by two psychologists, actually, Luft and Harry Ingham, and they developed the word JoHari from their names, Joe and Harry. And actually they did this work way back in 1955. And the work that they did was trying to understand how do we as individuals get known or become closer to each other, but also how do we present ourselves into the world. So you can see the framework already on your screen, and in this top left-hand corner, you can see there's the public self or the open self. This is the self that many of us have presented tonight. We have your bios. We can see what you look like on the screen. It's something that we all know about you now and what you know about yourself. So this is how we present ourselves to the world. But equally tonight, there's the hidden self. That's the private self. That's the part that maybe you're yet to share with us. These are things that you know about yourself, but others don't. And so we just scratched the surface of this evening. We shared where we were born, where we are right now, how we're feeling. And some of us got to share with each other stories about how we started out on this work, what motivated us, what inspired us. And so slowly we got to know each other a little better from the hidden self. Then there's the blind self. That's the things that you know when you see somebody else, but they don't know about themselves. For sure, many of you are observing me tonight and you can see things, some ways that I react to things. You can see the way that I present. You'll hear things that I've missed, things that I've said wrongly, whatever, and that I might be unaware of. So this is what we observe in other people. This is the blind self. And then last but not least is the unconscious self. This is things that we don't yet know about ourselves and that others don't know about us. And we might only become aware of that when we have a new experience or something changes in our life. In my team, in the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, we've been talking a lot about this as we process our experience of COVID and lockdown and the world changing, is how are we changing in ourselves? What have we learned about ourselves that we didn't know before as we've had to go through this experience? And so we're becoming more conscious about our unconscious selves. So in this framework, there's the public, That's what you see. That's what we know. That's what's on the internet. It's what people can find out about you easily. But then there's the private self, the things that we don't always want to tell other people, or we may not yet be ready to share. Then there's the blind self, what you don't really know about yourself. Actually, by giving feedback, you can learn a lot about ourselves when others give us feedback. And last but not least, the unconscious self. So to help us get this a little bit better, I've put it into two other forms. In the UN, you often talk about the field. As somebody who lives in Cambodia, I often object to this word because people often say that we are the field. So I'm not sure where this field is, but okay, anything out of New York seems to be the field. And so here's a camel. You can see the whole camel. You can see a part of the camel. You can't see any part of the camel, that's blind. And then there's no camel at all. That's the unknown one. But equally then there's the JoHari Window in New York. And so the public self is what everybody talks together about in dinner parties, or that you used to do that before you had lockdown. But then there's the unknown self, the things that you do on the weekend that you don't want your colleagues to know. So for example, I know that Emmanuel often impersonates Elvis on the weekends. And so he doesn't share that publicly with others, but I've now shared that with you. Then there's the self that others know that you don't know. And that's what people say about you behind your back, perhaps. It's what they discuss at dinner parties that you're not invited to. And then there's the stuff that life hasn't thrown at you yet, like when you fall in love, or when you get a baby, or when you're sent off to some place that you've never heard of and you have to work out how to live there. These are the things that you haven't done yet. But more seriously, this framework actually is supposed to be a tool that helps us to think about how we change these boxes. And so actually the goal, and part of what we've already started doing tonight, is trying to expand this public self. How do we get to know you better? And there are two ways that that happens. One is that we self-disclose. That's what we just did. We shared a story that's more personal that helped us to get closer to each other. And so in effect, the public square gets a little bit bigger. But also we can give feedback to one another so we understand better how others are perceiving us or reacting to us or experiencing us. And as we do that, the blind self becomes smaller, the hidden self becomes smaller, but the open self, the more vulnerable self, the public self, becomes bigger. And so part of our aim, both this evening, but also in the next 12 weeks, but also in mediation and dialogue, is to try and practice these things, to self-disclose, to tell more about yourself, to share more about who you are. Because in your vulnerability, others will also feel comfortable to do the same. And to give feedback. Feedback is not criticism. It's a way of us saying, when you say that, I want to know more about what you're saying. I'm interested in why you react that way. I want to hear more about what you're doing. And in giving that kind of feedback or solicitation, drawing people out, we'll get to know more about them too. And somehow, this is how we build trust and relationship with one another. So this is not a tool that you have to be totally on top of, but this is a way for you to start thinking about how are we going to practice over the next 12 weeks vulnerable leadership? How are we going to be open to hearing from one another? How are we going to ourselves start to be able to disclose more and build greater trust with one another? Let me stop